is Dr. Jose Saldívar with another episode of the Way to College podcast. So, one of the wonderful things about the podcast is I've met a variety of people, all kinds of people with interesting stories, and today is no different. So I met this individual, I don't know, 4 years ago, probably 4 years ago, when a group of friends and I wanted to find a place to meet regularly to talk about writing and creative writing endeavors. And she was gracious enough to allow us, the space to shoot a short movie and to meet regularly. And she has a really great story that I thought would make for a great interview in the podcast. So I'm going to let Maryann introduce herself. So Maryann, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners out there?
Hi, I'm Maryann. I graciously allowed these guys to talk about creative writing in a safe space. That space being Grind Coffee Company. We've been open for 5 years, going on our 6th year. And, I opened this coffee shop with the intent of just loving coffee and having a safe space for people who just want to get out of their house. When I was in high school, I needed that space. I had that space, and I wanted to give back to the community in that way. And of course, along the way of me having that safe space, I fell in love with coffee. So, I opened a coffee shop. And along the way, I went to school and whatnot. But now I'm here, and now we're talking. We're having this conversation. Yeah.
So Maryann, a lot of my guests, they talk about their educational journey, and I think when we think of education, we think of like formal education, like school. And but that's not always the case. I think life, right, is our best educator, and so. I remember you telling me about your own sort of experiences with education and even through the university. And so this is why I thought your story would be a really great story to tell, because sometimes college isn't for all of us. Sometimes we realize, right, we can still, I think, achieve our dreams without having to go through sort of the formality of let me go and earn a degree, right? If I ask all of my guests this, if you had to go back and choose a point in your life where you could say my educational journey started here, where would that be for you?
My educational journey?
Yeah, formal or informal?
Okay, formal. So obviously formal was 2000 when I was like 5 years old, when I was a kid. And then of course when I went to college, I went to UTPA. I think that was the formal and informal.
How so?
You learn a lot about yourself there, that you realize, I went to school with the intention of, I have no idea what I'm doing, but everyone seems to be going to school, so I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. And, when I was younger, I had this really heavy desire to become a writer, to work on a television show, to do these really creative things. And it was in college where I actually developed anxiety and depression, and that really stunted a lot of my growth. But it also led me to where I am right now. So if it wasn't for all the things that I did in college and all the work that I did, it probably wouldn't have taken me to where I'm at right now.
So you wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
Right? But you said it was in college that you experienced depression, right? Probably some doubt about the path you were on.
Actually, no. It was never the path that I was on. It was I really got triggered with anxiety. So I actually have a severe anxiety disorder. Which is great because, I thrive. It's very funny. I thrive in extreme stress. But when I was diagnosed with that, I was put on medication, and I'm on medication today. But the thing is, I was no longer feeling the desire to write. It was as almost as everything that I had inside of me just went blank.
So what was next for you? Like, so experiencing that and feeling like, you have this desire to write, and all of a sudden it's gone. What do you do?
I went through a really rough period in my life trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was still going to class. I was struggling to go to class. And unfortunately, I was going to school at a time where, anxiety and depression weren't really considered a disability. Mm-hmm. And they could be, I had a really hard time driving to school because of my anxiety. So I would say that's definitely a disability, especially when it's full flare. So I stuck around at home. I would still write, but my writing didn't feel genuine anymore. It didn't feel authentic. And I think that was where I realized, okay, I really need to figure out what my passions are. Again, I had to re-figure out who I am. And in that process, I got back into technology, right? And I slowly started falling in love with coffee. And it was at that point that all the emotions that I had towards writing and being able to tell a great story, they were just shifting into coffee.
Wow.
And I realized that every coffee has a story. And it was almost like, instead of writing emotions, my taste receptors were giving me that light of this is fascinating.
Yeah.
This coffee's fascinating. It tastes like blueberries. It's not supposed to.
So I was going to ask, but I think you answered it. I was going to ask, when you couldn't, when there was nothing there, that desire to write wasn't there anymore. I was going to ask you, was there ever, for you, was there ever a point where you thought maybe I should get off the medication because I missed that?
Yes, yeah, 100%. That was something that I battled with a lot at the beginning of my mental health journey, right? Do I get rid of this medication so I could feel, right? Or do I keep on going and feel better? Because the thing is, I could feel, but I would feel everything 10 times worse than the average person. So that was a decision that my family actually told me. They're like, you can do what you want, but they're like, based off of our experience, I wouldn't do it. So I did. I had times where I would try to wean off of my medication. It did not help. And it was worse. It was because your body at that point is already like, hey, I feel really great about a lot of things. Yes, I don't write the way that I used to, but I'm really happy where I'm at. And that was where I had to make that decision. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to stick by this. I'm going to stick by the medication, and I'm going to eventually get to where I was. Yeah. Whether it be with writing, continue wanting to write, or, find a different passion. I've never really been scared of starting over. I've been scared of losing myself. At the end of the day, that's the thing, is you're scared of losing yourself because you're not doing what you want to do.
How did you find coffee?
Coffee, so I always give thanks to Jitter's Coffee Bar in Mission. In the journey of getting to know myself again, I would hang out at Jitter's Coffee Bar. And I had a couple of friends who worked there, and I had a lot of friends who would just go because it was in Mission, and I am from Mission. And I would spend my days there when it was too hard for me to drive to So I would spend my days there because it was the only place that I could drive to without having a panic attack. And I would sit there, I would get coffee, I would write. I would essentially write my inner monologue. Because that was the only thing I could write. I couldn't get into detailed stories, but I could write my inner monologue, and it was just a stream of consciousness. And so I would sit there, I would do that, I would read a little bit, and I would try everything on the menu. That's where I realized I'm lactose intolerant. And that's also where I slowly started taking away milk from my coffee and adding in just a little bit of sugar, and then eventually I went to no sugar. I was actually, and I always say this story, this is like the moment where my head was just like, this is it. I got an AeroPress over ice. It was an Ethiopia Yirgacheffe. And the barista was like, hey, why don't you try it without sugar? And I took a sip and I tasted blueberries. And that was just like a light went off in my head, and I just needed to know more. I needed to taste more. And that was probably the last time that I stopped. That was one of the last times that was the first time I got black coffee and just wanted to taste everything. And it was like the beginning of just like black coffee or like don't talk to me. Now I drink lattes because, hunger suppressors and stuff like that. But yeah, that's where it started. So my love for coffee started at Jitters, and it also helped me get out of my comfort zone, which was my home. So it kind of solved a lot of my little problems that I had at that particular time in my life.
Yeah.
And then I started buying equipment, for my house, and I started buying coffee from different places, and
Aren't you pre-med?
And then that was the beginning. That was the beginning for me.
So all this time that you're going through, right? You're on medication. You start going to Jitters. You discover coffee and all of the different types of coffee in the story, right? That you said coffee tells. What's going on with your relationship at school at the time?
I withdrew. I had a really bad experience with the counseling department at UTRGV or UTPA at the time. And one of the therapists, just like to be quite frank, like very, very honest with you, I had mentioned that when I was on my period, my emotions were extremely heightened, or it was either before it was when I was about to start my period, my emotions would get really heightened, and I'd get really emotional, and I'd get really sad. And he said, like women thinking that PMS does that to them, that's not real. And I was like, you're not a woman, I'm out of here. And the only way that they would continue to allow me to miss class was if I continued to go to therapy. So I withdrew. That was around the time that there was a suicide at the UTPA campus, and I literally couldn't get on an elevator because of the enclosed spaces. I couldn't walk up the stairs because I just thought of the girl who had, committed suicide. And it was too hard for me to be on campus, and I just couldn't continue my education that semester. So that was a big, stop to my education. And it just got harder from there. I couldn't sit in, I couldn't sit in class for an hour and a half. That's even now to this day. If you tell me you need to sit down for an hour and a half and not talk and just listen, that sounds like torture to me now. I literally cannot do that. You could tell me like do an online class and you can do it in increments and I'll be like, great, that sounds perfect for me.
Yeah.
But I could not sit down for that long and listen to someone and stare at them like with complete focus.
How did your parents respond to that?
You know, my parents are actually really cool. They both dropped out of high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and my dad, he got his GED when he was, I think, 19. And when I was starting college, he told me, he was like, you don't need to go to school. You could start working. But of course, I didn't know what I wanted to do at the time. And he would always tell me, he's like 1 out of 10 or like 2 out of 10 people who go to college are actually graduate. He gave me like a really crazy statistic. And I was like, you don't know that? He's like, yes, I do. He's like, not everyone who goes graduates. He was like, and people realize they don't like it when they're there. And that's okay. So my dad was, you know, my family, they were really okay when I decided to just drop out. Mm-hmm. I told them I needed a year to kind of figure out my life and figure out what I wanted to do. I had 2 classes left to graduate.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was burnt out. And I was like, I just need a year and then I'll go back and I'll finish because I just have 2 classes. And in that year, grind came to be. So I didn't slow down.
Yeah.
I just kept on going, but with something that I actually cared about.
When did you know you wanted to open up a coffee shop?
I've always known that I wanted to open a business. Mm-hmm. I just never knew what the context was.
I mean, like, no one does.
So when I was a kid, I was like, you know, my parents owned a business. So I saw, like, the work they put in. I saw that they, you know, pretty much could say, I'm getting a vacation this week and everyone else has to work. I mean, they wouldn't do it in that way. And they would honestly just work all the time. We never really got a lot of vacation. But I grew up around it. So I didn't know anything else. Mm-hmm. And when I got older and my parents would tell me, you know, like, oh, hey, like, you don't have to go to college, it would just kind of like, it would fester in my mind a little bit. Like, okay, well, like, if I don't go to college, what am I going to do? I still want to do something really like that I love. And everything else that I loved, like any other hobbies that I had at that time, they all had to be, you know, you had to have a degree to go into any sort of field, except for coffee. And I love the space. I love that I was able to bring a space to the community, and as when I was in high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So it never occurred to me it was going to be coffee. I just knew it was going to be something. Yeah.
So the break away from school and going and hanging out at Jitters and being introduced, like trying everything on the menu. So coffee became that content.
Yeah. Coffee became, it was pretty much I woke up and I was like, I'm going to Jitters. You know, it was the one thing that I did throughout my day that I just I looked forward to.
So, you know, Maryann, with a lot of my conversations with young people, I find a lot of people that have ideas for a business or say they want to open a business, a lot that want to open coffee shops.
But it's like, I'm not like...
Was it scary at the beginning?
No, it wasn't scary. I feel like I have an amazing support system. Mm-hmm. My parents, when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. She was, you know, she's fine now, but I guess like she went through a moment in her life where she was like, you know, you should do what you want to do. And at that time I was working at Jitters, and she saw the dedication that I put into that shop. I would wake up at 6 a.m. and go to H-E-B if they didn't have milk. I would go at midnight if we needed to get milk. I was constantly putting in extra time and effort, and she was like, if this is what you want to do, your dad and I will back you up. And she was like, you just got to tell us and show us that this is what you want.
That's awesome.
So it took me about a month, to kind of like figure out, is this what I want to do? And I was like, no, I would love to do this. And then I got the LLC paperwork started, and then it was like, okay, now I need to find funding, and throughout the way, like, they were guiding me through it. So it was never scary because I had guidance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What advice would you give another young person who wants to start a business, like a coffee shop? What advice would you give them?
So I think you should do it. I think you should also not be scared if you fail or if you don't reach the success that you think you're going to reach. And and truthfully, like, the number one thing is, don't expect to become a millionaire overnight, or don't expect to become a millionaire just by having a coffee shop. It takes a lot of it's a labor of love.
Yeah.
I think if you love what you do, that's your level of success. So I don't think the amount of money that's going into my pocket, which is, and I'll be very honest with you, it's not a lot, but it keeps, people walk through the door and they enjoy themselves here, and they're able to be who they are outside of their home and outside of their job. And that's success to me, is that people love this place because they can just be.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely one of those labors of love. And I would say you have to do it if you love it. Like, whatever you do.
Yeah.
You have to love it, and you have to kind of push through the hard times also, because there will be hard times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's advice, but that's just like kind of like what I've gone through.
Yeah.
And don't doubt yourself. I doubt myself still all the time, and then there's still people walking through the door, and I'm just like, I mean, maybe they like our coffee. And
it keeps me coming back.
Yeah, like, maybe they like it, I guess. I don't know. And like, sometimes your doubt is just your anxiety. And I mean, I know I struggle with that. So
Yeah.
I know that sometimes I need to just shut up.
So, Maryann, thank you so much for your story and for what you've shared and your journey. What's next for you? I mean, you've got a successful coffee shop. Before we started, I asked how long. You said you just celebrated 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you kind of downplayed it, but I feel like one, statistically they always say if a restaurant or like a coffee shop makes it a year, that's something.
Yeah.
But I feel like, especially in South Texas, in the Valley, that's really something. Yeah. Because, I wasn't used to seeing coffee shops around for a long time. I'd see coffee shops open and then they'd close, a few months or maybe a year or two. But you've stayed the course. You've been committed, right? It is, as you say, a labor of love. What's next for you? What would you like to see?
I always say, like, the next part is to have a grind in every corner. Not every corner, but I would like to at least open one in every city in the Valley, in the RGV. I love this place. I don't think people realize the potential we have to be so successful here. Mm-hmm. And I want to develop the community just in general down here in the Valley, because we have such a great and rich culture, but also community. So that's in the works, and it'll happen. But the thing is, it's not gonna be in a crazy timeline, and by next year we're gonna have like 10 new locations. That's it's realistic, like you can do it, but are you going to do it well?
Yeah.
And sometimes taking your time to make these decisions and develop structures to get to that point, so it's just a real easy, let's open up. That's where I'm at. So right now, I'm in the process of developing that to develop more grinds.
I love that, because I feel like, I'd say that seems consistent with you and your story, because I feel like if had you gone like a traditional, let me go to school, let me get a business degree, then it just feels like people that go that route are all about, like, I've got a 5-year plan, I've got a 10-year plan, I've got to open so many within a year, 2 years, right? And I think, having experience, you having the experience of opening a business and growing it as you have, the struggle, the work that it takes. And so I think for you to say, you're on your own timeline. And as things, and you're going to pay attention to the little details that are going to get you to where you want to be, versus this needs to happen year 1, this needs to happen year 2. I think that's a breath of fresh air. And so I appreciate that. Yeah,
thank you. I think timelines are your worst enemy.
Okay.
Like, no one the people who graduate in 4 years from college, like, they must have not had a job. They must have, everything must have been paid for. Or maybe they got a whole bunch of loans. Nothing happens. You have to be okay with life taking its course and stopping your plan in your head.
I love that.
Because if you think that life is not going to get in the way of your 10-year plan, you're mistaken.
She's not yet.
Just because you can think of it and you can work your hardest to get there, doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that's I think that's the easiest way to believe you're a failure.
Are the plans not sticking to the plan?
Or is the reality that life will throw something in your path and you will not hit your goals at the desired time you have? Life's got other plans. I completely agree. I mean, I work with first year students, and one of the conversations I have is reality, right? Because I think students come in, they've got all of these lofty goals, and I think that's great. It's wonderful to have goals, but I also kind of have to do a little bit of a reality check at the beginning and just say, let's talk about what's going on in your life now, because chances are, just in this first year, there's going to be some sort of conflict that's going to make things a little difficult for you. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And so I think for you to say that, to kind of remind us of that, I think is important. So let me ask you, because I feel like when people are faced with a setback, some people give up. Why didn't you give up?
Why didn't I give up?
Yeah.
I didn't think that was an option.
I love that. Giving up's not an option. Okay.
Not that I never thought of giving up, but I never thought of that as I'm just gonna not do this anymore.
Yeah. I love that. I love that optimism. Have you always been this optimistic?
No.
Because I think it's easy. I think it's easy to say, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore.
I mean, it's easy to say it, but I think it's harder to just stop.
Yeah.
I mean, as I've gotten older, there's a lot of cheesy things that go into life, but also very scientific, like a body that stays in motion remains in motion, or whatever that science stuff that I learned in school that one time. But it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So I just like if I stop now, like I don't know. In my head, I see it as hurting myself.
I think that's a great point. So I think, so for our listeners out there, when faced with a challenge, when faced with an obstacle, when faced with a setback, I think a lesson that I certainly am taking from you is, and that you didn't say directly, but it sounds like this is what I'm picking up from you, Maryann. Please correct me. You've already invested so much in yourself, and you've already invested so much in your dream. Like, why would you stop?
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't make sense. Like I'm investing so much already, and I've had this one setback. Let me just give it all up. Like it's just that seems crazier than saying like
I'm done.
Yeah. Like that just seems crazy. Like it makes much more sense. Just keep going. Push forward.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear because that's what I'm picking up. Like sometimes I think we're faced with like, oh, it's hard. I want to give up, but we forget. Like, man, I just put in so many hours or years and money and invested so much of my time. I mean, I can't imagine how much time you invested at Jitters. Drinking all of the coffee, but not only that, learning about the business, learning about the coffee, learning how to make the coffee and grind the beans and do all of the things, and especially the things that happen behind the scenes that nobody ever sees.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine how much time you've invested in that.
I've actually never saw that as investment, which is even funnier. So I'm just kind of enjoying my life, doing what I do, and like if I meet people, that's cool, and if I don't, that's fine too. No, I've never seen this as work. Yeah. So I guess like that goes with that whole like sentiment of like you never work a day in your life if you. The only time that I see it as like extensive work is when like this week like the refrigerator broke down. Yeah. I don't know how to fix a refrigerator.
Yeah.
And that's like the mental like, okay, how do I deal with this?
Yeah. That's when the business side kicks in.
That's when the business side kicks in. So that's definitely one thing that I always tell people. Like, if you love coffee, don't open a coffee shop. And then that's just like, oh my god. If you love money, also don't open a coffee shop. I do not get to enjoy coffee as much as I used to. Yeah. So just for like a picture of what's going on right now, there's probably like 8 people in line at the shop, and there's one barista, and I'm thinking, oh my god. I'm like absolutely just like there's so many people in here right now, I need to go help. And so you don't get to be able to sit down and enjoy a coffee with a friend because you're working. And like to me it's no big deal. Like I could totally handle it. I'm just like, it is what it is. She's gonna have to figure it out. Yeah. I'm gonna figure it out too. But yeah, so it's a really weird place to be. But I love serving people also. Yeah. So I think it takes a very specific combination of qualities to love having a coffee shop, even though you don't get to enjoy it as much, and like don't love money too much, but you love people.
We had $1 million stage setup. We had a full LED screen.
So
like a race stage.
It's an onion. Like there's so many layers.
Obviously, Kate brought something to mind. So many years ago when I was in college, I would bartend, and I remember sitting down with my buddy my senior year, and I drew a bar, and I said I want a bar, right? And it's still been one of my dreams. I'd love to open a bar, but like your advice is giving me pause and like thinking like what are the making money, I think, for me is as long as the bar survives. I'm not looking to get rich off the bar. And for me, I definitely understand what you mean about serving people and like that aspect of it that you talked about, because I love that aspect.
Yeah.
Like for me, it is about the conversations and helping people and serving people. Like that's what I love. I love doing that.
Yeah.
So you just inspired me, right?
So maybe the bar is a good idea, right? If you don't want to get rich off of it, and I'm just kidding, but like, eventually you can. it just takes a lot of time,
Yeah.
but you meet a lot of really great people, and you wish that you could see them forever in your shop. I'm so happy I can still see you here. And it brings a lot of joy to me. And that's like the payoff for me. So like, instead of like, oh, I'm like a millionaire and I'm just like, I'm never in the shop, I'm never working, everyone does all my work and I just like sleep all day. Yeah, that's not my life. But the payoff for me is seeing you guys come in and you're still so invested in this establishment.
Yeah.
That's the bigger payoff for me.
Well, we appreciate you, Maryann. And I want to be mindful of your time and the demand here at the shop. So
It's fine.
well, any final thoughts?
I don't know. I was thinking about how we were going to be talking about how school is not for everyone, and something that's really important to me that I want to share with people is, school is not for everyone, but don't think just because like if you don't go to school you're not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. That's not a staple of success. That's just sometimes what is told to us to get us out of high school. Mm-hmm. I think there's so many people who do things that they love that are non-traditional, but still bring them a level of success that they are okay with. So in that sentiment, I say if you want to work at the mall and be a manager at a department store, and you think that's your, like, it may not feel like at this moment in time that's a level of success. Sometimes they give you the best rewards by just being by being there, and that comes with that sentiment of like, I love serving people. Mm-hmm. And I love seeing the same faces here day after day. So yeah, I think we need more people who are specialists in their craft than college graduates. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that. So yeah, I would say, dude, like if you want to make furniture out of steel, do it. That's so cool. And then call me because I want to buy it. You know, like don't just settle for like, oh, I'm just gonna become an engineer, or I'm gonna like. Sometimes I feel that is settling. Mm-hmm. I wanted to become a writer and a TV show producer and then a computer scientist. Like, that's what I wanted to do, and I'm doing this now, and I'm pretty sure I'd a lot happier than I would be in that situation.
Yes.
So, follow your dreams, kids.
Maryann, it has been everything I hoped it would be.
I'm glad.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I tried.
No. I knew you'd be honest, and that's what I always look for from my guests. You know, I never have pre-planned questions. I don't script anything. I just want to hear, you know, as they say, straight from the horse's mouth, right? What is it that you're thinking? Tell me about your story, and then we'll just go from there. We'll just see where the story takes us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I know we've been talking about this for years, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But so it's finally good to sit down and
it came to be.
Yeah.
At the perfect time.
Exactly. So this concludes another episode of the Way to College podcast. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode, and we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.